Yeah, a great college student summer vacation.
Well, I had a wonderful time, and also it was my introduction to that professional world.
Yeah.
We had a 2-week rehearsal period, and then the show opened. It was boom, boom, boom. We had to learn things quickly and be responsible, and it was a wonderful experience.
Yes. Okay, so you got a part at the Dayton Community Theater at the Dayton Playhouse.
Yeah, my first
at the Dayton Playhouse. That was in '06. Mm-hmm. So you were still teaching full time at that.
Yes,
time.
And I had been on stage in the music department a couple times before that.
Oh, they had opera.
Yeah, in the opera productions.
And you directed opera too.
Later on, yes. At first, in I believe 2000 was the first one, I talked my colleague Kim Warwick into doing my favorite Gilbert and Sullivan opera, which is the opera Iolanthe.
Uh-huh.
And it took some talking. And she finally came back to me and says, okay, I'll do Iolanthe, but you have to play the Lord Chancellor. Uh-huh. And I thought, oh geez, how can I squeeze this in, my teaching schedule and everything else? But I did it and had a wonderful time. It was one of those experiences where I hadn't been on stage like that in quite a few years, since my grad school days. I was briefly in a Gilbert and Sullivan Society in Lansing, and so I had some experience with that, but I'd never played this role. And this was one of those, gee, I forgot how much fun this is kind of things. And then a couple of years later, I was on stage again for Kim as the Duke of Plaza Toro in The Gondoliers, and then another couple of years, so now I think it's 2004 or so, as King Gamma in Princess Ida, one of the lesser-known Gilbert and Sullivans, the original women's lib musical, I like to call it. And in Princess Ida was one of our students. He had started as a music student, but he actually graduated with a theater studies degree. His name was Adam Lay. And Adam and I were both in Princess Ida together. He graduated, and I'm getting ahead of myself. First, as his honors project to finish his theater degree, he directed a production here on campus in the Director's Lab Theater of Stephen Sondheim's Assassins. And he cast me as Charles Guiteau in that production. And again, it was one of those, gee, being on stage in a musical, this is lots of fun. And then he became director of the Dayton Playhouse when he graduated. And he just kind of casually put me on the email list. And so I started getting the notices of when auditions were coming up and things like that. And I decided to try it. I had always shied away from it before. I'd been asked. I knew Paul Lane was a well-known guy in town who did a lot in community theater and at Sinclair, and actually was on the faculty here at one time. And his wife, Dee, were both active in community theater. They had asked me several times, and I just always said, gee, I don't see how I can give the time to devote 2 or 3 weekends plus a 6-week rehearsal period and so forth. But Adam started a thing at the Playhouse that he called the Flip Side. And it was 1 weekend only productions, most of which were readers' theater. And so it didn't quite have the commitment of time demanded. And the very first Flip Side production he did, he also tried to do edgier kind of repertoire that would not normally be on the Dayton Playhouse season. The very first Flip Side production I went and auditioned for and got cast was Sam Shepard's Buried Child. And I was in the smallest role in the play, the role of Reverend Dewis. But oh my gosh, I had a wonderful time. And during those first 2 years that the Flip Side existed, I think they did 10 or 11 of those Flip Side productions. And I was in 5 or 6 of them. So, and then finally, I went that next step and got myself in one of their full main stage productions, playing the Emperor Joseph in Amadeus. That was my first full-out Dayton Community Theater production.
Uh-huh. The Emperor Joseph in Amadeus, yes. The one in which Mozart comes to, and Scagliari plays plays a welcome for Mozart, and
Yes,
and then
yes.
Mozart says, "Oh, I think that I can do that better."
Exactly. There's that wonderful scene.
That
Yes.
is a wonderful moment. Yeah. Uh-huh.
and then not long after that, I had my first, what I consider my first really major role on a Dayton stage, and that was George in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf
Ooh.
at the Playhouse.
Oh,
That's a biggie.
that's a big one.
Yeah.
Well, if you can do that, you can do anything. Well, I know that your last time that you were on stage just here weeks ago was King Lear.
Yes.
Now, that's harder than George.
Yes, it is. King Lear is the hardest thing I've ever done. I don't have to think about that.
That's a very difficult role.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
It was a production at Clark State College
Uh-huh.
in Springfield, directed by a friend of mine who works with the Cincinnati Shakespeare Company,
Uh-huh.
and so somebody I really trusted to do that project with.
You've won a number of acting awards. Tell me
Yeah.
about that.
Well, in town, most of the community and some of the college theaters are part of an organization. It's called the Daytonies / Dayton Theater Hall of Fame. And there's a yearly awards banquet. It's kind of a mini Tonys, Oscars kind of thing. The member theaters send representatives to each other's productions, and they submit ballots, and the shows get evaluated, and then these Daytonies are given out in the categories you might expect for acting and supporting acting and so and directing and set design and sound design and all of those kinds of things. And I've won 16 Daytonies over the years.
Uh-huh.
So most of them for acting, but one of them for being the foreign language dialect coach for Amadeus, because there's all that Italian, French, and German that's spoken in that play. And I've gotten 2 of them for musical activities, for music directing or for being pit keyboard player, those kinds of things.
Uh-huh. Well, with your talents, there's no end of people knocking on your door, and at your age now, there isn't a lot of competition.
This is true.
Uh-huh.
This is true.
Uh-huh.
I think I told you before that sometimes I'll go to an audition and there'll be a role for an older man, and there'll be 2 or 3 of us in the running. Roles for middle-aged and older women, there'll be 28 women in the room, all competing for the part. So that's a good thing.
Uh-huh. Do you have anything coming up next?
I just had a show canceled. We had actually started rehearsals and it got canceled. So I'm not doing anything right at the moment. But in about a week and a half, I'm going to be auditioning at the Dayton Theater Guild for their final production of the season.
Uh-huh. You gave me a list of the shows that you've been in, and it's really phenomenal. I went through, starting in 2006, you have 4 credits. The following year, 5. The following year, 5. That brings us up to 9. 2009, you had 6 that year, 5 the year after, 4 the year after that. You certainly have been very, very busy, and you probably you could become a teacher of theater now.
I think I know a lot of the repertoire, that's for sure.
Well, you could teach voice.
Yeah. And actually, I did here for a few years back in the 80s teach a history of the Broadway musical, popular musical theater, we called it, class. So I did that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
I actually created that class at Sally Johnson's request, if I remember right.
Uh-huh. That should be a popular class.
Oh, it was. And mostly theater majors
in
the class, of course.
Right. Well, is there one particular class that you would rather teach rather than anything else?
The class I loved teaching, which I taught only on and off earlier in my career, but for the last, I'm not sure how many years, maybe 12 or 15 years of my career. It was a course called Form and Analysis. And that was my favorite class to teach.
Mm-hmm. In a word, what is form and analysis?
Well, some of it was a survey of some of the standard forms of the Baroque, Classical, and Romantic periods. Sonata Allegro form, which all composers used for first movements and sonatas and string quartets and symphonies and so forth. Rondo form, various other kinds of things. But simply techniques of analysis for musicians who need to figure out what makes a piece of music tick, and who need to know why a particular place in the music needs a pause, because of the shape and form of the piece. This is something that good performers do. Mm-hmm. And then techniques of analysis for 20th century music as well, which can sometimes be baffling, by the traditional theoretical concepts.
Now, you're very active in theater, but you still are doing musical things. I know that you at the Yellow Springs Chamber Music series, that you often introduce the music.
Yes. I have been giving these concert previews for a long time. Actually, the very first one I ever gave here in town was my second or third year in town for the Dayton Opera, way back in the late 70s. Some people might remember the Dayton Journal sports writer Ritter Collette. Mm-hmm. He was also an opera buff, and he and I appeared on a couple of panels discussing operas for the Dayton Opera. He was a wonderful man. And I've done them for the Dayton Opera, I've done them for the Bach Society, I've done them for the Dayton Philharmonic. But then in the last, it's gone on for quite a while. For several years, I was the concert preview lecturer for all of the entire Chamber Music Yellow Springs season. The last couple of years, I've just been doing one or two concerts in each season.
Yeah, the Yellow Springs Chamber Music is a wonderful organization.
Oh, it's fabulous.
They bring some wonderful performers there. And Ritter Collette, he was associated with OU, I think, Ohio University, and I remember him, and he would refer to plays that he's seen here and there and so forth. He was a very interesting man.
Yeah, he was very knowledgeable about opera. I remember he and I being on a panel about La Traviata. I think that was the first one. Verdi's Don Carlo, I believe. He and I sat and discussed. And maybe Puccini's Turandot. Well, I associate him with those somehow, but my memory could be faulty on that.
Well, for retirees who may be listening to this and watching this interview, I think you're an inspiration in terms of what to do with your life when you quit.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, please.
And that is that I also serve on the reading committee for the Dayton Playhouse Future Fest.
Oh, yes.
And this is, the Dayton Playhouse's summer festival of new plays.
Yes.
6 plays get produced in one weekend.
Yes.
And what we call the original committee narrows the submitted plays down to a semifinal 12 to 18, very slightly from year to year. This year we have, I think, a little under 250 submissions. We have a committee of, I think we're about 15 of us this year. And each play is guaranteed 5 reads. This means everybody on the committee probably is going to read about 90 plays by the time the process has worked itself out. I think I've read, probably 70 so far this year.
Yeah, that's a chore.
It is. And to be frank, sometimes you don't finish a play, it's never going to go anyplace. It's not good enough to make the cut. Sometimes you skim very quickly. Yeah. But then sometimes you really get absorbed and you spend the 2.5 hours reading a play carefully.
And you've performed with the Future Fest.
Yes.
And that's only one performance, but 4 weeks of rehearsals sometimes.
Yes. 3 of the plays are presented as readings. And sometimes they are just as simple as sitting with a music stand and reading. Other times you're up on your feet staging it, but you've got the script in your hand.
Oh.
But 3 of the productions are full productions.
Oh.
And so, yeah, my very first Future Fest was 2006, I think, or 7. I'm not sure. But I was in 2 plays. I was in both of the Sunday plays. I was in a staged reading Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, and then I was in a fully staged 3-character play at 3 p.m. I've never been so tired in my life as after that.
Well, Chuck, Charles, Larkowski, I appreciate your coming in for this interview. I think you have had a fascinating life. I admire you greatly, and I think our viewers of this video and people who read it are going to be equally impressed. So thanks very much.
Well, thank you. This has been a lot of fun.
Okay, we'll come in and turn it off.
Okay. That was fun.
Yeah. There's just you've had a very interesting life. And I never understood people who say, well, I don't know what I'm going to do when I retire.
Yeah, and I've got time to do some of the reading I never had time to do, I've subscribed for years to the Atlantic and Harper's, and for so many of those years I was just skimming and didn't have time to read what I wanted to read, and by the time I got papers graded.
I've been running a discussion group for over 10 years now called Socrates Cafe. We met yesterday, as a matter of fact, and one of the things that we went around the room on, it was a topic of tariffs and trade wars, and then I asked people to talk about the magazines that they subscribe to and read. A lot of people said, well, I subscribe, but I don't read them all because I don't have time to read them all.
Yeah.
And it was interesting.
Well, I added New Yorker last year, and now I'm almost back in the same boat, particularly if I'm in a play, and I'm working on lines and so forth. But.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many of them, and it's just hard to keep up with them.
It is. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
And I like to keep up with the movies and things like that. This year I actually saw all 9 of the Best Picture nominees.
All of them.
Yeah.
We missed Dunkirk. We got to get that on Netflix or something.
Yeah.
Loved Loving Vincent.
I didn't love it like some people did. I after about 10 minutes, I thought, well, I'm tired of this gimmick. I missed seeing nuances on actors' faces. I don't know. It was beautiful, but I didn't love it.
Oh, it really thrilled me. I liked it a lot.
I went with my old good friend Jack Harding, and whose son, by the way, is a Wright State Theater grad. And Jack just loved it. He was just ecstatic over the movie, and I wasn't as enthusiastic as he was.
A moment that just thrilled me no end was in Darkest Moments, the Churchill play. Have you seen
Darkest
that?
Hour? Yeah.
Darkest Hour. At the very end, there's a fight going on between Neville Chamberlain and Lord Halifax and Churchill. And so Churchill, of course, is the belligerent one. The other guys, they want to make peace. And so Churchill goes in. He addresses the Parliament, and they come over to his side. And then Neville turns to Lord Halifax. He says, "What just happened?" He says he mobilized the English language and sent it to war.
Yeah, I remember that one. Yes. And of course, his abilities as a writer and orator was a chief factor of his whole political success.
Yeah. He was a.
I have been rewatching the first season of The Crown with John Lithgow as Churchill,
Mhm.
which I think is also one. I just watched as I'm rewatching it, so I can go on to season 2 because it had been so long. Last night was the episode in which they unveiled the portrait that he hated so much, and then his wife burns it. There's been a lot of Churchill in the movies, because there was that movie called Churchill last year as well, which was also very fine.
Yeah. I saw I, Tonya, and
I didn't see that.
it was okay. I wanted to see it because of Janie.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, her acceptance speech was perfect.
It was.
It was
Absolutely.
short and it was articulate, and I want to hear it again.
She's very impressive.
She is. I've known her mom, but I haven't talked to her for ages.
Yeah.
But no, and she was so good in West Wing.
Mm-hmm.
Incredible.
I don't remember the name of the movie. She did a kind of this is maybe 5 or 6 years ago. She did a sort of abused, battered wife part in the movie that wasn't very splashy. She didn't get a lot of publicity over it, but I thought it was just a really affecting performance. I was so impressed with it. I go to movies to see actors, mostly.
The water thing, I thought, that is an impressive movie, and it should win all the Academy Awards except Best Picture.
Yeah.
But it won Best Picture.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry. The thing with the Daytonis, I just find it very difficult sometimes to say that this performance is better than that performance. So much of it depends on the script.
Sure.
There's just so many things.
Sure.
And how you can vote and say the best editing or the best sound for people who are...
When it's two different movies that have completely different requirements for sound. Yeah.
And sound here was wonderful, and sound here was wonderful.
Yeah.
What's the difference between the two of them? I mean...
And completely different technical problems that were overcome.
Yeah.
Or, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Have you seen Black Panther?
No, I've not.
See it.
I don't go to superhero movies.
Yeah, but I think you should see it.
Oh?
And yes, it's got that
Yeah.
aspect to it. It's a Marvel thing.
I just look around me and I thought, why didn't these people outgrow this when they were 14? That's how I feel about them.
Oh, Sharon and I went to see it. We went up to the Regent Theater at the right around the corner here, and we sat through 6 previews.
Mhm.
And all of them teenage boy
Right.
preview.
Right.
Yeah. I started shouting out. I said, "No, not another one."
Yeah. I don't go to these superhero and comic book character things. I don't go to action movies.
Yeah.
I don't go to Disney kiddie movies either. I might take my 5-year-old granddaughter to one, but
Yeah. Well, I think the interesting thing about the Black Panther is this. There was one white face in it, maybe 2, but there's really been a revolution in the last few years about for most people about seeing black people.
oh, certainly. You bet.
We're seeing them now being interviewed on television, on being commentators, on political commentators, and to see a whole movie with only black faces in it.
Yeah.
You start saying, oh, boy, she's good looking. He's very handsome.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And
Did you see Moonlight last year?
I miss Moonlight.
See it.
Yeah.
This is one of the best movies I've seen in many, many years.
Yeah.
In fact, I went back and saw it again. I just wanted to take it in again. I thought, to me, that's a movie that's going to stand the test of time.
Your Wright State graduate worked on that.
Yeah, I know.
And she'll be nominated for the Academy Award for production coordinator for Black Panther.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That came out too late to be eligible for this year. It'll be
Right.
nominated for next year.
Yes.
So I couldn't get you to be in.
Yeah, I had agreed to play on one of our graduate students' graduate recital, and it would have conflicted with one of the Sunday afternoon performances for you. And we thought we had it all lined up, and then I think you wanted me to be one of the Italian male trio. Bienvenuta cara sposa.
I love that song.
Yeah.
I like that show because the music is so eclectic.
Yes. Yes.
And everyone is sort of fresh.
Mm-hmm.
And you know,
I have the 2 LP cast album at home. I've always loved that show, and of course, you know, it had the misfortune of appearing on Broadway almost simultaneously with My Fair Lady, which swamped it at the Tonys, you know, and in terms of just general publicity, and it never entered the popular consciousness, you know, because you mentioned Most Happy Fella. People have heard of Guys and Dolls. Just say, "Oh, it's the Guys and Dolls guy," you know. And oh, okay.
Yeah, very eclectic music, very good.
Yeah, the Italiano vibe in so many of the songs is so wonderfully captured, I think. You know, I like a big Italian sposalizio. Yeah. And the Most Happy Fella, the title song, right off the bat. It's that Tarantella rhythm. And then his Mama, Mama, up in heaven, how you like a girl. I just love that. That to me is just...
Yeah, I forgot his name to play the lead in that, and his voice went out on him.
Oh, and that takes the voice.
You know, I think I don't know what happened. He was smoking too much or whatever. I was really nervous. He said, "No, I'll be okay," and he was okay. So
it was my first real production that wasn't just church or school or something.
Yeah.
And the guy who directed it, his name was George Bellis. And a couple of years after that, they built a professional dinner theater in Jacksonville called the Alhambra. I think it's still there. And he became the first executive director of the Alhambra Dinner Theater. Because the last time I saw him, I lived in Jacksonville for a year between my degrees. I took a year off school after my bachelor's degree. And my wife and I went to the Alhambra Dinner Theater, and I went backstage to say hello to George. He was directing Don Amici in The Girl in the Freudian Slip. Typical dinner theater fare. You know? I don't know why I remember that.
Don Amici.
Don Amici.
Don Amici.
Yeah.
I remember Don Amici.
Yeah, Alexander Graham Bell in the movies.
Yeah. Don Amici. And the what? The
Girl in the Freudian Slip.
Freudian Slip
was the name of the play, which was one of those little frothy 60s comedies. Small cast, you know.
Well, I've gone to Future Fest the last couple of years, and I went last year. I was able to get a ticket on the front row because on some of those shows I couldn't hear people. I couldn't, you know, and
which is ridiculous in that little theater.
It is.
I hope you never had that problem with me.
I don't think so.
Because you saw me on stage the previous year in the play about the thalidomide drug scandal.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Yeah.
I enjoyed doing that role. He was a real bastard.
Well, you know, I admire anybody who is in those shows because it's a lot of commitment of time and sort of frustrating. You one performance. Right. I directed one down there years ago about Romeo and Juliet, the takeoff on Romeo and Juliet. So it was a staged reading. I spent a lot of time on that show, though.
Oh yeah, and as a performer, sometimes the stage reading is every bit as demanding on you as a fully produced show.
Yeah, and I had
because you can't have your nose buried in the script. You have to have it all but memorized anyway.
Well, I think I told him it's got to be 95% memorized.
Yeah, I remember an incident one year at Future Fest. I was in a play. I had a very small role. I was in a play called Roosevelt's Ghost, and it was a political play which was a fictionalized version of the Alger Hiss affair. and I played his father, who sort of disowns him, totally ashamed of his son for being involved with these pinkos, you know. But the man who was playing the lead, my good friend Dave Shuck, and he's normally a very, very fine actor, but we got to the talk back afterwards, and someone said,